Hey guys, Sean here. Today, Luke and I are back with another tier list. Today, we're continuing our best lore decks tier list series with the best Visas Starfrost lore decks. So, there are only a few lore decks in the Visas Starfrost lore, however, a lot of these have been very impactful. Some of these decks have been very meta relevant, one even being a tier 0 deck. So, let's get right into it. We have a few tiers here. We have
Criminal Record, You Mean My Lore. We have Cash Me Outside. We have Wouldn't Shed a Tear, and Vita, more like Beta.
Alright, let's get into it. To begin with, we have the man himself, Visas Starfrost. Now, I'm including Visas Starfrost himself, Visas Samsara, his retrain, and then Visas, like Aratama, or whatever that card's called, the synchro that searches any Visas Starfrost Speller Trap. And we'll also kind of include, like, any Speller Trap or whatever that is very specifically related to Visas Starfrost. So even like Vicious Astrolabe, we can even include that if we want. He's not a deck on his own. He kind of fits into every one of these decks in a way, but on his own, not really. So basically, the main lore of the Visas like Starfrost archetype is basically that you have your guy here, Visas Starfrost, and you have different like dimension versions of him. So with Scareclaw, you have your Reichhart, which is the same stat line as Visas Starfrost, so 1500 attack, 2100 defense, and they're kind of all like the evil versions of Visas Starfrost. So essentially, Visas Starfrost goes around to all the realms and has to kind of like put his evil versions in their place. So in tier you have like Rhino Heart, you have like Rise Heart and a Rise Heart in Kashtira, and so on and so forth. And eventually he comes full circle. Each one of the realms represents like a realm of rebirth in Buddhism, so that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool foundation for a lore archetype, and a lot of the like final support cards were all about like the new world, so you have like clear new world and all that. So essentially the world kind of resets and all that, so it's very cool. Visas himself doesn't really have anything to do with that. Visas more cares about himself. He pops cards on the field with different attributes than himself to special summon them, and he has some synergy with a lot of these decks, but for the most part you'll only play Visas in Vanadium. He actually is pretty like mandatory in Vanadium decks. Other than that, you won't really play him in these other decks. They get along just fine. So Visas as his own kind of, not really archetype, but the Visas support is pretty cool. I even think the Synchro Monster being like a generic Synchro 8 that searches you a counter trap is pretty cool. Not many decks actually use it, but I think it's cool that like it can be used in a lot of decks. So we'll put him here for now, just for the reason that he's not really his own full deck.
Alright, well first up is Scareclaw. I would put Scareclaw at the lower end of Cash Me Outside, just because I do think it is very good in the sense that it has a very interesting gimmick to it. I've actually played against this in locals before, and one thing that I will say about it that it is very annoying. It low-key kind of reminds me of inferior Buster Blader in the sense that you're kind of building up your level 3 beast monsters in order to kind of climb your way up into your boss monster, which is Scareclaw Tryhard, who has an effect that it forces all of your opponent's monsters on the field to go into defense position, which can be very, very annoying because when your monsters switch to defense position, it can be very, very hard in order to get them back into attack position, to get yourself into a winning state, to attack for game. So you can already see how that's really, really annoying. But what makes it even worse is the fact that you're able to manipulate some of your monsters in order to gain some attack and be able to inflict some piercing battle damage. So it can be really, really critical to have Tryhard on the field in order to turn all your opponent's monsters into defense position, because that inflicting battle damage can be so threatening to your life points that you could end up just losing right there and then. It doesn't use Visas Starfrost as much as the other decks would, because Visas Starfrost has like the effect that needs to pop monsters in order to kind of get its effects. You mostly use that gimmick in Vanadium, but I think Scareclaw in itself is pretty good, and the fact that Tryhard is just a Link 3 that just needs 3 effect monsters in order to go into it, I think it is a very good boss monster. I also like Beast and Beast Warrior decks as well, so it's pretty cool to see it.
Yeah, I also enjoy like the kind of the tri-type Beast Warrior Wing Beast decks. I also do enjoy that it is like a going second kind of OTK deck, which is cool because it also has some like cards that are good for going first. As a trap where you can like pop one of your Scareclaws and 2 of your opponent's monsters, it is pretty cool that it can kind of go first, but it's mainly supposed to be going second deck. Very reminiscent of Crusadia, the way you kind of go for OTKs, because you have a bunch of your Scareclaw monsters on the field that will give your other Scareclaw monsters like effects. One of them will boost your attack, one of them lets you attack multiple times. It's pretty cool. Kind of similar to new like Rebelbot's deck, which is really cool. But overall, it's not great. It's very kind of underwhelming compared to a lot of the decks on the list. But for now, we'll keep it here in the bottom of Cash Me Outside. Next up, we have Tyr. Tyr is a criminal deck. This deck is insanity. This deck was the most recent like Tier 0 deck. The whole gimmick of this deck is milling cards. So I guess the way this kind of incorporates the lore is that they're all like sea creatures and you're milling your cards, or you're throwing them into the ocean, and then, you know, you get a bunch of effects. So all of your Tyr main deck monsters besides Rhinoheart, when they're sent to the grave by card effect, you can fusion summon using material from your grave. So this just means that if you can mill a bunch of cards, you can go into a bunch of different very strong fusion monsters, and since all your Tyr cards mill a bunch of cards, you're able to use the effects of other very strong graveyard cards, stuff like the Ishizu cards when they were legal, generic stuff like Fairy Tail Snow if you're playing Master Duel. There's just so much crazy stuff that this deck could enable. Horus as well, just so much stuff this deck could do. Could play on your own turn and your opponent's turn. All your cards just keep coming back. Your Kaleido Heart, if it's sent to grave, just brings itself back. Ruklos does the same thing, if it's sent to grave, just brings itself back. These cards are just absolutely crazy. They had to be hit so much for them to even be considered like dead, but even now, you could still consider Tyr a rogue deck, because it's just so strong. Even with Kitkalos banned, which Kitkalos itself was one of the most insane cards this game's ever seen. Yeah, this deck was crazy. Absolutely insane. Best deck in the game, I would say.
Yeah, probably the best deck ever, to be honest with you. It was just so consistent, and like there was almost no beating it. The only chance you had of beating it was going with a mirror match, and even then, it can be very, very close and hard to beat. It will kind of come down to luck in certain circumstances. Tyr had to be neutered so much, they had to ban Kitkalos, and they had to put almost all of their main deck Tyr monsters to 1. There was just no stopping it at all. I think it's a really, really cool deck. I mean, I just love mill decks. I think they can end up being a lot of fun. But Tyr kind of took it to the next level and just made it unbelievably crazy with the way that they can end on so many boards. They're able to just bring themselves back out, set up a bunch of disruptions. And also the fact that even now, like last time we were in locals, which isn't even all that long ago, I faced against a Tyr pile deck. So there's just no ending this deck. It will always be a fan favorite now at this stage, I think. And there's no chance of it going away anytime soon. Definitely deserves to be at the very, very top of this tier list.
Next up, Kashtira. Kashtira was also a very strong deck. It was the next best deck after Tyr basically like got banned to oblivion. The deck that came after that was Kashtira, and Kashtira was insane. It still is like very strong, and all the cards are just very strong. But the main culprit in Kashtira was their Xyz monster, Kashtira Arise Heart, which was an insane floodgate. While it was on the field, any card sent to the graveyard was banished instead. It was super easy to summon, and it had a once per chain effect where anytime a card was banished face down, you could attach a banished face down card to it as material, and then once per turn quick effect, detach 3 material to target a card in the field and banish it. So yeah, this card was just crazy. Kashtira themselves are just really strong at just like banishing your opponent's cards face down. And banishing cards face down is one of the strongest ways to get rid of cards because there is no way to get those cards back. They can all special summon themselves from the hand if you control no monsters. Unicorn is able to look at your opponent's extra deck and banish one card face down. Fenrir is just able to banish face down any card in the field. One of their Xyz, Shangri-Ira, is able to just lock your opponent's zones, which was really crazy back when cards like Diabolosis were legal. You could just lock all of your opponent's zones. And yeah, it's related to the lore. Their whole gimmick is that they kind of like steal things and take control. So you're just literally taking control of your opponent's board. So yeah, I guess in the lore, it's pretty cool. I do genuinely enjoy kind of decks that have a lore and they apply that kind of lore to their playstyle. So I think that is very cool. However, this deck was so cringe with a Rise Heart legal. And even now, no one wants to see anyone summon like a Fenrir or a Unicorn because there's such free summons for your opponent that are so hard to out because you have to invest like so much resources into outing just one like Fenrir or something like that. So yeah, a very, very strong deck. Tyr is still 100% better, but this deck was a fair match against it.
Yeah, so when Tyr, I would not want to say died, when Tyr kind of like petered out a little bit, Cash kind of took over. It was pretty much the perfect counter to Tyr because Cash mainly focused on banishing stuff and Tyr focused on milling stuff, and of course you can't really mill when all of your stuff gets banished. So Cash was pretty much like the perfect counter to Tyr. It's unfortunate that they never got like them both being at full power to go face to face, but I'm sure that would have been an interesting match. What I really think about like Cash, you can tell how good a deck is when people start bringing back old school tech in order to counter it. Like people were citing in Book of Moons or even Book of Eclipse as a way to kind of like tackle Cash. They were a very, very powerful deck. So powerful that, you know, their main monster had to get banned, which honestly is good to see. It definitely made it a lot more balanced. But as you already said, like Cash is just one of these decks, just not fun to play against, even now. Like, what I also don't like about it is that you can just throw in 3 copies of Fenrir and 3 Unicorn to most decks as well. They just serve as really, really good extenders. But yeah, I don't think that they are as good as Tyr. I don't think they ever will be. But they still hold their own, and God, they were a really, really difficult format to play against.
Next up we have Mannadium. I'd put it above Scareclaw.
Yeah, definitely. If not for anything, but I like Fury decks. I really think Mannadium's a very, very good deck. It's a synchro kind of focus archetype, which goes well with the Visas Starfrost, just because with Visas Starfrost has some effects that you're able to kind of like pop your own monsters in order to get some advantage off of that. Mannadium was great because they have 2 level 2 tuners, Mannadium Fearless and Mannadium Meek. What's really, really great about them is that they both have like generic sort of effects where they're able to special summon themselves onto the field from your hand if you control Visas Starfrost, or a monster that has similar stats, i.e. the 1500 attack and 2100 defense. And also what's really, really good about those tuners was the fact that they're able to kind of like recycle themselves as well. Like if they get destroyed and leave the field, you can bring out another one over the exact same name from your deck. So that's really, really great too. What I really like about this deck as well is I really like synchro boss monsters, and a synchro 10 boss monster is really, really good in the likes of Mannadium Primeheart. The reason why a lot of people played Mannadium and Scareclaw together was because they both kind of lend themselves well to being like a battle phase focused decks, in the sense that Mannadium Primeheart, he can attack a number of times during the battle phase up to the number of tuners used for a synchro summon. Anyway, you can make up a level 10 using as many of your level 2 tuner monsters as you can, just so you can get a bunch more battles during the battle phase. So it really went hand in hand with the likes of the Tryhard, in the sense that I was able to turn all your opponent's monsters in defense position, so you're pretty much open and free to kind of go in for a lot of attacks. So I think they definitely deserve to be hand in hand next to each other in Cash Me Outside.
The only problem with what you're saying is that maybe that was what the intention was for Mannadium, but Mannadium just ended up being a King Calamity turbo deck, and the minute they banned King Calamity, no one played this deck anymore. This deck stopped topping. And you could say, oh, decks like Centurion were also King Calamity Turbo, but Centurion is still getting tops, whereas Mannadium is seeing a lot less play. And it's not like the deck is bad, the deck is still very, very good, but you just don't see it anymore. But the prevalence of Charmies and all that, it's just a lot harder to play kind of a synchro combo deck like Mannadium. It's a cool deck and I really like it, and I think the gimmick is cool, but it does suffer in the modern day, and even generic synchro bans, cards like Barone and stuff like that just being banned from TCG, really do hurt the deck. But I will say it's very cool, and I do think it still is like up here on the tier list. And finally, Veda or whatever it's called. I bet half of you didn't know this was even a deck, because I didn't know this was a deck. This is the Pendulum version of like Visas Starfrost. So they all kind of cover the different summoning mechanics. Vedas are much more of a lore deck than all these other decks. These decks could kind of function in a meta. There's like 5 maybe cards. There's like 2 main deck guys, and there's like a few spells, and that's about it. Their main boss monster, I will admit, is very funny. It's a pendulum that it gets like counters on it, and then once you have 12 counters, you can summon it, and then during your opponent's turn, if they special summon a monster from the extra deck, you can banish 12 cards from your hand, field, or graveyard to make it the end phase, which is hilarious, but it's never going to happen. It's very, very funny, but it's not going to happen. But it does feel like that this deck is trying to combine all of the different decks here, because in order to get so many cards in the graveyard, you do want to play like tier and get all the cards in the grave. If you want to summon this card and get the counters on it, I believe you need to pop cards, which means that you want to play something like Vanadium. I think it's really cool that it tries to combine all the decks together into one deck. However, that's just not how it really works, so it's not a great deck, but I think it's super cool, and I like how it's supposed to be the all-encompassing deck for the Visas lore.
It's a shame it only has 2 monsters, but hey, maybe there'll be more in the future.
Alright, that's it for the tier list. I know there was only a few, but I think they're all very cool. Like, the Visas lore was very iconic. All these decks were like genuinely meta relevant. Even when Scareclaw first came out, it generally did see like a lot of play. And then of course all the other decks like Tyr was a beast. Kashtira is still seeing play. Less so for Vanadium, and let's just ignore Veda. But these cards, these decks did make an impact on the Yu-Gi-Oh meta. And I think it's really cool. These decks were released in tandem with the Albaz lore, and we know how popular and strong the Albaz lore was. But even with like branded at full strength, Tyr was still the best deck in the game. So it really goes to show how much of an impact the Visas lore and their decks did have on the game, and I think it's really cool. So let us know what you think in the comments. Also let us know what kind of lore you want to see next. We have stuff like Diabellstar lore we can talk about, World Legacy, Dual Terminal. Let us know in the comments what you want to see next. If you're looking to buy any of these decks in real life, we do have a TCG Player affiliate link you can check out. Buying cards from that link directly supports the channel and helps us keep up the content. If you also want to support the channel, make sure you consider becoming a member. Members get access to our videos as soon as we make them. Special shoutouts to all of our members: Kieran Thompson, Ron Eel, Master Jojo TCG, John Cran, Vex, and Lazard. We really appreciate the support. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more tier lists.